It's another Football Friday in Oklahoma City. I'm Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman, joined by our Football Friday crew from his home in Norman, columnist Barry Trammell. From the newsroom here at 100 West Main in Oklahoma City, columnist Jenny Carlson.
Greetings.
From somewhere in the greater OKC, I guess greater downtown OKC, OSU beat writer Kyle Fredrickson.
Howdy.
And from More America, OU beat writer Ryan Aber. Hey, Ryan. Hey, guys, let's start with quarterback free agency. Looks like it's hit us. Yesterday there was news that Trevor Knight had been granted his full release from the University of Oklahoma. And then before nightfall, a report came out that said Kyle Allen, Texas A&M sophomore quarterback, says Oklahoma comes to mind as the kind of place he'd like to go. Barry, have you ever seen anything like this? College football quarterback free agency is hit.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been going on 6 or 7 years this way. I mean, it hadn't hit us in Oklahoma a bunch with OU or OSU, but it's been a little bit of a free agent frenzy. Russell Wilson, one of the best quarterbacks on the planet, left North Carolina State to go to Wisconsin a few years ago. You know, Oregon got Vernon Adams this year from Eastern Washington, and they ended up playing against his old team in the first or second game of the year. So it's been happening quite a bit. We've seen two Sooners do the same thing with transferring. So before now, to me, it's a good thing because it gives some of the players some of the autonomy that the coaches don't only have but use. So what's good for the goose, it doesn't bother me at all.
Jenny, is there anything different about Trevor Knight in that this is not coming at the end of the season? This is coming with OU on the brink of the college football playoff semifinal against Clemson. Presumably he's going to go out there as a captain and the backup quarterback in the midst of what is sort of the walk year of his contract.
Yeah, I mean, it is unique and definitely sort of unexpected. You know, we heard him, 10 days ago or so, say that, he was all in to what's going on right now. Didn't say explicitly that he wouldn't transfer, but, it sounded like he was at least trying to, give the impression that he was all about OU. So, I mean, it is a little bit bizarre, especially because of the stakes that OU now faces. But where this report came from, I mean, it's out there, obviously, but, maybe Trevor Knight didn't expect this to become public while games are still yet to be played. That's entirely possible as well. So it does make for a little bit of a unique situation. Is he going to walk out there as a captain? What if he has to play? All of those things come to mind, and I have to think that this wasn't a situation where Trevor Knight, Bob Stoops, or whomever sort of expected it to get out there. If they did, that's even more interesting in the whole situation.
Ryan, do you think this will change Trevor Knight's status at all for the Orange Bowl?
No, I can't imagine so. I wasn't surprised that this came out when it did. I mean, like I believe as Barry wrote in his blog earlier, if he had waited till after this game is played or after the national championship game is played, he'd be far behind in the transfer process. It's something that, unfortunately, for players and coaches who want to move on, this is the time of the year when it happens. I don't think there's any way that he will not be a captain for the Sooners when they go out for the Orange Bowl. And if he plays, I don't think it changes much outside of him looking to the future. And I don't think there's a guarantee that he leaves, but there's a really good chance that he winds up finding another home next season.
Barry, you okay with him being a captain for the Sooners? And do you think this means he's gone?
I think it means he's gone. I'm okay with him being a captain. Most overrated thing in sports is football captains, for crying out loud. Half the schools pick them game by game. So it's mostly sort of a throwback to 1948 and who gets to pin the girl with whatever they used to pin them with. So it's not that big a deal. People know who the team leaders are, and just to be perfectly blunt, backup quarterback is is unequipped to be the team leader. So it was sort of a ceremonial title to start with, I think.
That's why I wonder if it'll stick. By the way, Kyle Fredrickson, I've left you out of this, but I'm going to make you captain of this Football Friday.
I appreciate it. It's an honor.
Even if Barry thinks it's not. Ryan Aber, what can you tell me about Kyle Allen?
Well, he's a guy who came in with a lot of hype around him. He came from Scottsdale, Arizona, which OU fans might recognize that as the hometown of wide receiver Mark Andrews. And Kyle Allen was Andrews' high school quarterback. He had some success early at Texas A&M, got the job this season, but after 7 games lost it. Kyler Murray took over, and now in that regard, it's no real surprise that Kyle Allen is looking elsewhere, and it's not a big surprise that Oklahoma could be a destination point given the fact that Baker Mayfield right now, barring some other change here in the future, is only going to be a Sooner for one more season.
Jenny, is this any kind of signal that Mayfield's not going to get that extra year?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I guess there's a chance that OU knows something, or they're not telling us. But I think they're going to put it through the process if they feel like that there's a process that they can go through. I think it's pretty unlikely for a lot of the reasons that have sort of been lobbed out there, and the fact that it would have to be approved by the schools that Baker Mayfield's going to turn around and play. Is Texas, is OSU, is Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU, are they going to be on board with another season of Baker Mayfield? Probably not. So, I mean, I would think that the chances
you can say Texas Tech about 5 more times.
Oh, okay. Texas Tech, Cliff Kingsbury, alert, whoop, whoop. I mean, I just don't think they're going to go for it. And, in addition to Cliff Kingsbury, then I think it's the other teams that, they've seen how good Baker Mayfield makes these Sooners. I just don't think they want any more years of that than they have to. So, if they can sort of hide behind the whole idea of the rule, which it's there, they get to decide these things. I just don't think the chances are real good that Baker Mayfield's back for next year with the Sooners.
Barry, is this a good thing or a bad thing for recruiting? If somebody like Kyle Allen shows up and becomes a quarterback in waiting, it'd be the second time that OU's gone away from the high school production line to get its quarterback. They've got a commitment from Austin Kendall, I believe, Ryan. So how does this, what effect does any of this kind of talk have on recruiting?
Well, let me see if I'm framing the question correctly. You're asking if a guy that played at a major school in Texas, grew disenchanted over playing time and other things, decides he wants to transfer and wants to come to Oklahoma, which seems well stocked at quarterback. You're asking if that has a chance to work out. The answer is yes.
I actually didn't ask if it has a chance to work out. What I asked is, does this have an effect on the historical way they go about getting quarterbacks, which is recruiting them from high schools? Does this hurt OU's recruiting?
Well, now you're sounding like Barry Alvarez and Tom Osborne. You care how people score their touchdowns instead of just that they do score their touchdowns. Who cares where the quarterbacks come from as long as they're coming?
Ryan, you follow recruiting closely. Is this something that Austin Kendall would see and say, why do I want to go there?
I don't think so. I think quarterbacks are generally, and athletes in general at this level especially, are pretty competitive. I think certainly Austin Kendall would be open to a competition against Kyle Allen. Now, I don't know if he winds up looking elsewhere. I doubt he would, given the fact how his recruiting has gone. But it's certainly something interesting to watch. He'd be the one that would be affected by it. I don't think if you look beyond this, if you look to Chris Robeson and even beyond that as far as quarterback recruiting, they're not going to be too concerned about Kyle Allen. But clearly Austin Kendall would be somebody to keep an eye on as this goes. I don't think this is going to be something that's going to become a routine for Oklahoma and Bob Stoops. But I think if it works out for the Sooners, they've at least got to explore it.
Doesn't a high school recruit looking at this say, hey, Kyle Allen lost his job at Texas A&M.
To a freshman.
Yeah, and they're
He'll
not
be
playing in the
freshman.
college football playoff. So, I mean, is this guy yes, he was the top quarterback recruit in his class, but he still lost his job in a team that's not as good as Oklahoma. So, does that make him a slam dunk for sure? I mean, I wouldn't think so if I was a quarterback coming into Oklahoma. So, in the immediate, I don't think it impacts it a ton. Now, if Kyle Allen wins the job and then he's got 3 more years of eligibility, maybe then that starts to affect things.
Wait a minute.
Kyle Allen would only have 2 years at Oklahoma.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
So I don't think it'll be too big of a concern.
Wait a minute.
Let me say this. This idea that when guys transfer out, whether it's Trevor Knight going wherever or the dude from A&M coming to Norman, it doesn't work out as near as much as we think it does. I mean, let's look at the guys that have left recently. Kendall Thompson going to Salt Lake City. He didn't win the job at Utah. Meanwhile, there's a guy around in the same exact boat as Trevor Knight, had the chance to leave, said, you know what, I like where I'm at. This team's been good to me. I've been good to it. Let's stick around and see what happens. J.W. Walsh now is a 5th-year folk hero in Stillwater.
Speaking of J.W. Walsh, we'll bring the captain of Football Friday in, Kyle Fredrickson, and ask this question. Kyle, we were talking about in the office a couple days ago. Has J.W. Walsh's production obscured the excellence of Mason Rudolph this year?
Absolutely. When you look at Rudolph's stats compared to his peers in the Big 12, he ranks 3rd in passing yards per game with 299, 4th with 21 total touchdowns. In a league with, Baker Mayfield and Trevon Boykin, I think those are respectable numbers. But, if J.W. Walsh wasn't taking away so much of Rudolph's red zone production, I think there'd be a lot more talk about Rudolph being, an all Big 12 caliber player, as to where he didn't even make the honorable mention team. And that just kind of shows you the perception of Rudolph within this offense, the way that, they've used him and J.W. Walsh interchangeably, especially in the red zone, how much production that's taken away from him, and maybe how that's kind of put a ceiling on how people view him within the Big 12. Right now, Walsh has got more than 600 yards passing and 13 touchdown passes. If you gave Rudolph even half of those numbers, he would move up into that upper echelon of quarterbacks. So, there's no one out there who's saying that, Rudolph isn't a great quarterback and that he isn't, the guy to lead this program on for the next couple of years. But as of right now, it seems like he's been a little bit overshadowed by Walsh. And there's no denying that Walsh has been spectacular this season. We went into the year thinking that this package that they were going to install was probably just kind of a bone thrown to a redshirt senior who decided to come back to make sure he stayed involved. And he became an integral part of the offense. In that Texas Tech game, he almost single-handedly, brought the Cowboys back with playing a majority snaps in the second half. So you got to give him credit. But, no doubt Mason Rudolph is a guy, who's one of the premier passers in this league, even if sometimes the stats don't necessarily reflect that.
Barry, any chance that this indeed did start off as a reward for a good soldier quarterback, and then J.W. Walsh and the OSU offense morphed it into something more important, more productive?
Yeah, I think that's probably likely. And I don't think it was some sort of lifetime achievement award. It wasn't given to some guy who never won an Oscar, so let's give him an Oscar. I think they said, you know what? We've had trouble in short yardage. Even when Brandon Whedon was the quarterback, the OSU had some trouble short yardage. I think they said, you know what? This is a way to keep JW involved. Maybe we can use it 2 or 3 times a game. I think they maybe had a belldozer, perhaps, picture of what he could do. And then turns out, of course, they were reminded, like the rest of us, that when J.W. Walsh plays, he's often productive. Let's ask the Florida State Seminoles. So I think they just thought, you know what, we can do more and more with this. And all of a sudden, your belldozer has 13 touchdown passes.
What a shame that Jason Kersey and his buddy Buster couldn't be here for the J.W. Walsh admiration party. Speaking of that admiration, Jenny, doesn't Mason Rudolph deserve a little bit more? I mean, J.W. Walsh's dad threw him some for the way he handled this setup, this coming out of games as the team approached the red zone. Seems to be a little bit better than maybe what Landry Jones did in the belldozer era.
No doubt about it, at least seemingly. I mean, all signs outwardly and, from what we've heard inwardly would suggest that, yeah, Mason Rudolph has handled it better. Now, it's a switch in seniority. You know, Landry Jones was the older guy being replaced in those specialty situations by the younger guy, a guy that a lot of people said, hey, that guy should be the starter, not Landry Jones. It's the flip now. I mean, Mason Rudolph clearly established as the starter for a lot of the reasons Kyle was talking about. I mean, I always go back to his third down pass completions, just the way that he's saved and kept drives alive with his arm on third down. It's been remarkable. You know, you see that you see how different it is in the Bedlam game. J.W. Walsh, for as well as he played, didn't make some plays on third down that you almost come to expect from Mason Rudolph. So, you know, I think that's a little different. Rudolph's the younger guy. John or Helsley or Kyle wrote about it earlier this year, the fact that J.W. was really a help to Mason before he made that first start at Baylor and then went on to win the Bedlam game. So I think he sees Walsh as more mentor than threat. And I'm not so sure you could say the same thing about Landry Jones and Blake Bell back in the day.
Kyle, last point on this J.W. Walsh thing. Do you think it was pecking order that led Mason Rudolph to do this? Or do you chalk this up to sort of his overall Cary Grant unflappable character?
Yeah, I think it's a little mixture of both. You know, I think as a quarterback, you have to be able to move on from mistakes on the field and not show your frustration. And even talking with Brandon Weeden a few weeks ago for a few stories I was reporting on, he said that's one thing that he saw in Mason Rudolph, that when he threw a pick or when he made a mistake, he wasn't a guy who was getting frustrated and showing that visibly. And I think that kind of translates a little bit to this relationship he has with Walsh, that, you know, like Jenny said, when Walsh is coming in late in the game, you know, you don't see Rudolph being real animated or upset about it. And I think that's a little bit part of this guy's DNA, at least from what we know about him so far. But, you know, it certainly is part of the pecking order and how, you know, he came into the program and just the status that J.W. Walsh holds in that locker room. Because for as much as we joke around about, you know, how much we've glorified him on this team and his role, you know, it's no joking matter for a lot of these players who talk about him, you know, candidly, is really being that leader on the team. And, you know, Barry brought it up earlier, talking about how backup quarterbacks aren't necessarily built for that leadership role. I think this is one situation where you'd be hard pressed to make a counter argument to say, you know, that Walsh isn't that guy on this team.
Guys, bonus question I'm going to throw in. Just thought of it. 2 offensive coordinators at the state schools. Lincoln Riley receives the Frank Broyles Award. Mike Yursich, mentioned in connection with the opening at Tulane. Of course, we heard Lincoln Riley's name mentioned in connection with South Carolina. Before that went to someone else. Question is, who is more likely to stick around longer, Lincoln Riley or Mike Yursich? How about it, Barry?
I'm going to say Lincoln Riley because I think he's got a shot to be the next coach at Oklahoma. I think he'd be sort of a natural to take over for Stoops. I think he's probably recognized that. So if you know, if a good job comes along, he might have a reason to say, you know what, I don't need to take it, I can wait. Whereas if a good job comes along for Yursich, he probably says, you know what, this is my chance, I need to take it.
Geez, didn't we say that about the last offensive coordinator? I mean, I think he was married into the president's family.
Yes, I did, and then they went 8-5.
They ran Samaje Perine 4 times against Baylor.
Jeez. It didn't look to me like Riley ran Samaje Perine that many more times against Texas, Jenny. But who's sticking around longer, Riley or Yursich?
Yeah, I'll say Riley will be there longer. I just think at this point, when you're the offensive coordinator at a marquee place like Oklahoma, and the salary that he's about to get, he's going to see a big increase in salary here. You know, I just think that the steps up are fewer for Lincoln Riley, and so the fit's going to have to be there. Somebody's going to want him. He's going to want to go there. Whereas Mike Yursich, you know, I think we've seen a ton of these Mike Gundy assistants get jobs, and rightfully so. But I think the possibilities of where Mike Yursich could get a job is a little bit broader. You know, you look at Todd Monken going to Southern Miss, Tim Beckman going to Illinois, Larry Fedora going to UNC, you know, just a more wide variety of possibilities. And by the way, is anybody else weirded out by the fact that a year ago we were basically wondering if Mike Yurcich was going to keep his job as offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State, and now we're talking about where he's going to get a head coaching job? It's crazy how things have changed. Just one more thing about what's changed in Stillwater in the last year.
And there's another reason why Yurcich is probably going to be the first guy to go, because he probably needs to strike when the iron's hot. Because, let's say that this Cowboy offense starts to sputter a little bit again next season, he's not going to be a hot coaching candidate. So if a Tulane comes calling, or some of these, smaller programs, I think Yurcich would be smart to take his opportunity when it's there.
Kyle, sounds like you think he might be gone this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. There's, with all the coaching changes that have been going on this offseason and all the open jobs and the speculation, I think Yurcich has done enough to make himself a guy that a lot of people would be at least interested in. I do wonder if his lack of experience at this level will become a factor. He's done some pretty good things with OSU this year and keep being creative in that 2-quarterback system. And people are going to look at that and think, wow, this guy's pretty high football IQ, and the way that he was able to utilize his personnel, in some pretty difficult situations without much of an offensive line. But at the same time, just 3 years, going into a program where, he was basically told, okay, come here and run our system. You wonder if that's going to translate to some of these ADs who want him to install an offense, because, is Yurcich going to install the offense that OSU runs? Is he going to go back to some of the things that he was doing at Shippensburg and maybe some of the things that Mike Gundy maybe held him back a little bit doing at OSU? Who knows? But, it just seems like him being a bit of a younger guy and a rising name in this profession, that if he does get that offer, I think he'd be smart to take it.
Put in a plug now for Kyle's Sunday story on Yurcich, looking back to his roots. Wasn't it Beyond the Lego Man?
Right.
Ryan, we got, I think, 3 votes for Riley being the guy who sticks around longer. What say you?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the opportunities for Mike Yurcich and the abilities for him to go somewhere that makes sense are a whole lot wider than they are for Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley can afford to be a lot more judicious with where he would move. Like Barry said, I think he recognizes the opportunity for, Bob Stoops has said he's not going to coach for that long. He doesn't want to be a Bill Snyder. Clearly, he's the one that would make sense on this staff to step up and keep things going. At this point, like you mentioned, Josh Heupel, though, we had those feelings a few years ago for another Oklahoma offensive coordinator. But I think clearly Lincoln Riley is going to have opportunities to leave, but I think that Mike Yurcich leaves quicker.
Okay, guys, quick thoughts about your matchup that you'll be covering. OU Clemson in the College Football Playoff, the Orange Bowl, OSU Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl. Jenny and Kyle, we'll start with you in OSU. Jenny.
Well, I actually won't be covering that game. I'll be writing about it, but I won't be covering it. But I think it's a great opportunity for OSU. I mean, clearly it was gifted to them by Texas and Texas's win over Baylor. Unexpected that they're in the Sugar Bowl because nobody expected Texas to win that game against Baylor. But, what a great opportunity to get win number 11, to do it against an SEC opponent. Clearly, Ole Miss has shown that they're capable of beating anybody. They're Alabama's one loss. So I think it is going to be a heck of a test, but at the same time, as big of a test as it is, it's also going to be that big of an opportunity for this program.
Kyle, quick thoughts on the matchup.
A lot of great matchups within the matchups. You got Laquan Treadwell, a Blitnikoff finalist, against Kevin Peterson on the edge for the Cowboys, a first-team All-Big 12 guy. You got Emmanuel Ogbah going against an Ole Miss offensive line that's given up just 17 sacks this year, ranks about 31st in the country. So just some of those one-on-ones within the big scheme of the game are going to be pretty fun, and a chance for the Big 12 to kind of tell the nation, hey, with all this talk about playoffs and our style of play and our rinky-dink defenses, this will be a chance for them to kind of quiet a little bit of that noise.
Ryan Aber, the Sooners and Clemson, the rematch of the Walmart Sweatpants Bowl.
Yeah, the thing I'm looking forward to, and Kyle mentioned the defenses in this league and the little respect that they get nationally. I'm really looking forward to Eric Stryker versus Deshaun Watson, and Watson has been absolutely fantastic this year, earned his spot as a Heisman finalist, beating out Baker Mayfield. But Eric Stryker last year didn't really look like he wanted to be in Orlando. I know there's a lot of Sooners who didn't want to be in Orlando for various reasons. But remember, 2 years ago, he got after Alabama's quarterback, made it a nightmare for him all day. And I think if he's able to do that, OU is going to have success against the Tigers. This is going to be different than last year.
Barry, how about you?
Oh, I have no idea who will win, but I think I know what the winning team has to do or what the winning team will do. Who tackles the other team's quarterback better? I really think it's going to come down to that. Who tackles Baker Mayfield? Does Clemson tackle Baker Mayfield better, or does the Sooners tackle Deshaun Watson better? You got two guys that are going to run around, make plays with their legs, make yardage with their legs, throw the ball when you've given chase. Whoever gets to the quarterback better in open field will win this game.
We're going to wrap up Football Friday there, but next week, here's an assignment for you. Think of what your Christmas wish is for somebody in college football. Bring it with you, and we'll wrap up there for all of the Football Friday guests, especially my captain, Kyle Fredrickson. That's all for this edition, but you can stay with the best coverage team anywhere, every day at News OK, and every morning in the Oklahoman.